The past is a mirror to the future, or so a friend once said to me. I did not believe it then. I do now. They say that to be an agent of the Imperial Inquisition is to see the true horror of the universe and still have the will to prevail. I have looked on the terrors of the universe. I have judged billions. I have known victory and touched defeat. My name is Gregor Eisenhorn.
We're sitting down here with Pixel Hero Games to learn more about a game called Eisenhorn Xenos. Tell us all about it.
So Eisenhorn Xenos is a third-person action-adventure game. It's an adaptation of the first book in the Eisenhorn trilogy called Xenos, which is written by Dan Abnett. And it's the first Warhammer 40,000 3D adventure game that's being made.
Cool. Let's jump in.
Great. So right now we're fairly close to the start of the game. The main character, Eisenhorn, who you can see here on screen, is chasing a heretic through a cryogenic facility. And his partner has just been killed. So you're quite eager to catch up to the bad guy. As you can see, we've presented the game sort of in third person, and the camera is sort of deliberately at Eisenhorn's eye level. We're trying to get across the sense that, you know, you're seeing it from his point of view, and not just that, but the really rather impressive scale of sort of the Warhammer 40,000 environments. So this is the cryogenic facility, and you can see there's quite a few people. And this here is the bad guy himself. I'll skip the cutscene and get straight to the gameplay for you. But we used this first level to teach you a lot of the combat basics. In the book, Eisenhorn later on has a party, but at this point, his party companion has been murdered. So you're chasing the bad guy seeking revenge, but it also gives us a good opportunity to get the player familiar with, you know, the main controls of the character, the exploration and the combat, and then later on we expand to more of the party system. So you have melee-based combat. There's also ranged weapons, and Eisenhorn has his psychic powers, which he can use, in this case, to push enemies away, whether it's one or a group of them. You'll probably notice, so the red bar is Eisenhorn's health, so he can take damage from blows, but the yellow bar is his stamina, or action points. If I hammer the button, you'll see the action points go down quite quickly, and now I've run out, so I have to essentially dodge enemies for a while. But the yellow indicator that pops above my head every once in a while, that's basically a combo timing window. If I time my blows with that indicator, the stamina consumption is reduced massively. So basically all the weapons have different timings and animations, which as you unlock them or buy them from the store, you get to sort of play with and master. There'll also be accessories and stuff that you can equip to both Eisenhorn and his party, which will sort of change the way the gameplay works. So you can give yourself more action points or do more damage, etc. But essentially we wanted the player to kind of learn sort of different rhythms that belong to different weapons and get a sense for what they like and how they want to sort of, you know, play the combat. And the idea is also we wanted to sort of try to avoid the usual thing you get in these 3D games where people sort of mash the buttons. You can sort of do that, you can still sort of get away with it, but you get a lot more benefits from, you know, mastering and paying attention to the timing of the weapons. So in the cryogenic facility I'm in right now, the heretic I'm chasing is essentially waking up the inhabitants early. So slowly, as you progress through the level, you're seeing that the situation in the environment is changing. Alarms are starting to go off. You'll start to hear the banging and screaming of people who are trapped inside of their cryo chambers, and it gets quite grim and dark. There's some sections, which we'll probably bump into later on, where you actually get to see some of the people dying, and you know, they try to kind of call on you to help them.
You want to kill me? You want to join me?
So there's a loot system as well as the party system, and they're all sort of linked together. Any kind of coins or loot that you get can be sold to buy better gear, which you can then give to yourself or your party. This is a good example of the auspex. So Eisenhorn has his own inquisitorial auspex, which allows him to scan the environments for sort of mechanical interactions. So you can see things, computer terminals you can interact with or potentially hack. It also kind of, you know, in this case, it's helped me to find a Steam vent in case I hadn't noticed it, which will unblock my progression. In the next level, Eisenhorn develops his psychic powers, and he also gets sort of a vision mode, which is not entirely similar to something you would see in Assassin's Creed or Batman, which is particularly useful in the stealth, as it allows the player to see enemies through walls, see their vulnerability psychically, so they can see how much the player can manipulate them, and you can kind of make decisions in that regard. One of the big factors we considered was how much to allow the player to change the decision-making process in the game, you know, influence the story. And we kind of decided early on, as fans of the book and the material, that what we really wanted was to stay true to the character and to the story. And so we felt that because of that, it was very important to not allow the player to make decisions that break the character, because he has a very defined story arc, which I don't want to spoil here. And allowing players to influence that would kind of ruin a lot of the coolness of that character and the story and why he's so beloved. But to counteract that, what we've tried to do is, throughout the game, there's situations which happen very closely to the book, but we try to offer as many possibilities for you to perhaps approach the gameplay differently. So in scenes where there may have been straight-out combat and gunfights, for example, in a hotel, we may offer you the chance to stealth through and see if you want to take out guys silently rather than get into a fight, or use, for example, hacking traps to take out enemies. So here I'm using the auspex to take out some EMP mines that would have given me some light damage. So this is one of the cryo people, which I mentioned before.
I hesitated. A merciful headshot would have spared her everything.
So as I've mentioned previously,
Hierarchy of hubris would not
much of the book is
understand
done in a style where there's lots of first-person narration. You get to sort of, you know, understand what the character's thinking and what's going on in the story and what his opinion is of people, events, etc. So we wanted to adapt that into the game. And so we've treated it very much in a style, something a bit like Max Payne. So Eisenhorn is narrating regularly over the gameplay you're doing, and he's commenting on, you know, the situation in the story, the situation in the environment, etc. And Eisenhorn himself is voiced by Mark Strong, who was actually the author's favorite pick for voicing Eisenhorn. So we were quite lucky to get in touch and get him involved.
The screaming, the pounding. God, Emperor, help me, I'll never forget that. Thousands of frantic souls waking up to face an agonizing death.
So we've just skipped ahead here. So this is later on in the same chapter, and you've arrived at this massive cryogenerator you can see here, which is powering the entire facility. So even in these sort of what you might call smaller environments, you know, there's a real sense of scale. You know, we've got like massive areas with lots of tombs or this kind of generator room, and then we contrast that with sort of smaller corridors to kind of build up the claustrophobia. You know, really get that sense that you're in this kind of dark, epic universe. So we've skipped again, and we're now approaching the finale of this sort of first chapter, opening sequence of the gameplay. And Eisenhorn's caught up to the heretic he was chasing through the facility, and he's also encountering now some of his henchmen. So you're going to get into a big fight. So what we have here, this is sort of the final gameplay mechanic other than the melee and the shooting and your psychic powers. We have something we've taken from the Inquisitor rulebook, which is called the pause for breath. So basically, you can hold down the pause for breath button, and it goes into this sort of slow-mo mode, where the player is allowed to expend their stamina points stacking actions. You can work this into a combo, so you can do one hit, and it can be like a finishing blow, or you can decide to, for example, say, the guy with the gun, which I'll do now. I want to get rid of him because he's a nuisance, and I'm going to spend all of my action points on eliminating him straight away, which, as a result of that, my stamina's a bit lower. I'm going to have to parry and evade slightly until I've recovered enough. So really, the control is up to the player. And different weapons will have different pause for breath attacks with slightly different effects. So some of the later, more exotic weapons might, poison a guy or set him on fire. So there's kind of variety there between real-time combos and this kind of slow-motion, slightly tactical mode. We wanted to kind of keep the combat open enough for players to decide how they wanted to kind of control the pace. So there I've run out of stamina, so I was able to just parry a blow. And I've got the main bad guy there, who's sort of a bit too cowardly to face me straight on. He's trying to evade me and send his henchmen after me. And the blue meter is basically the pause for breath bar. It builds up slowly over time, but if you do successful combos with successful combo timings, it'll build up faster. So that's part of the incentive. You can build up the ability to do that more regularly if you're getting the combo timings right.
Thinking of doing actual visual cues for it and not, say, audio cues or just...
To be honest, it's more one of these sort of traditional game development kind of gripes. You try to do as many cues as possible, so there's some audio cues, there's some animation cues, but for example, you have to take into account that some players may be deaf. And so if sound is the reliant thing to get across the information, it's not strong enough. So you usually try to support any significant mechanic in as many different aspects as possible, visually and with sound effects, to kind of, get that across to ensure that the player has enough feedback. So you can see here, I'm a bit of a badass. I'm taking on quite a few guys. And I've got the bad guy low enough now and taken out enough of his men that I get to get rid of him. Head on. Yeah, and his attacks have changed now. Now that I've gotten rid of his men, he's, I'm gonna try a little bit harder.
Come join her in hell.
Basically, you don't have to pause if you don't want to. You can use those.
You can entirely use the regular combat system. It's entirely up to you how you want to play it. Yeah, you can be sort of as real time or as slow mo down as you want. Some enemies may perhaps be easier to handle. If you use the pause for breath, or maybe later on, for example, you have some assassins who dodge almost all of your attacks, whether it's melee or ranged. They parry your melee attacks and they dodge your ranged attacks. So their vulnerabilities are you have to parry them first and make them vulnerable, or you could, for example, use the pause for breath. But then you run into that earlier kind of trade-off I sort of mentioned, where if you, for example, spend your stamina to kill the assassin, then you have to be aware of what that means for the gameplay with the other enemies who may be in the arena. So here we've got the resolution to this sequence. Eisenhorn is basically waiting for the player to prompt to execute the bad guy, which is a nod to the story because he kind of killed your partner. And earlier on, there's a line which Mark Strong narrates where he says he was going to take his revenge on iClone, who is the bad guy, with his partner's gun, which is the gun you've been using so far. So the player gets to sort of apply the finishing blow.
And that's it.
Yep.
So, what are your sort of plans with this game? How far is it in development? When is it coming out? All that sort of stuff.
So we've been in development for just over 2 years. We're looking to launch in just over 2 months, so in May. Yeah, it's going pretty well. We're fairly far along.
What platforms?
So we have 3 platforms. The first one is obviously PC, Steam, which we've been demoing now. And we also have a mobile SKU. The first one will be on iOS, so basically iPhones and iPads, and then down the line will be coming out on Android devices. And the plan is to ship the initial build with the story, and then we'll be doing updates with additional party members, new weapons, new enemies, as well as a bunch of arena modes. So for example, if you're a big fan of the combat, you could go and mess with different builds of gears for yourself and your party and do arena challenges and you know, have some fun with that stuff separate from the story.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.